Margaret Reynolds stood at the threshold of Lincoln Elementary, her weathered hands gripping the worn leather handles of her teaching satchel. At 62, she had taught for nearly 4 decades, but starting over at a new school still stirred those familiar butterflies in her stomach. Asterisk. The morning sun cast long shadows across the hallway as she made her way to classroom for B. Her sensible shoes clicked softly against the polished linoleum, a sound that reminded her of countless mornings just like this one. She had raised 3 children of her own, seen them through their struggles and triumphs, and now she was ready to pour that same nurturing spirit into other people's children. Asterisk, but Margaret had heard the whispers. Lincoln Elementary had a reputation. The 4th grade class she was inheriting had already driven away to teachers this year. The principal, Mrs. Davidson, had been honest during the interview. Asterisk, they single quotes challenging, she had said, choosing her words carefully. Bright children, but they've learned to push boundaries. They seem to take pride in making their teachers quit. Asterisk, Margaret had simply smiled and nodded. She understood something about children that perhaps the younger teachers hadn't yet learned. Challenging behavior often came from somewhere deeper than mere mischief. Asterisk, now. Standing before her classroom door, she took a slow, steadying breath. The nameplate read Mrs. Reynolds in crisp, black letters. She straightened her shoulders, turned the handle, and stepped inside. Asterisk, the classroom erupted the moment she entered. Paper airplanes sailed through the air. Children shouted over one another. Desks had been pushed out of their neat rows. It was chaos, pure and simple. Asterisk, in the center of it all stood Tommy Chen, clearly the ringleader. His dark eyes held a mixture of intelligence and defiance that Margaret recognized immediately. Beside him, Sarah Mitchell crossed her arms and smirked, while Jake Thompson balanced precariously on his chair, egging the others on. Asterisk, Margaret didn't raise her voice. She didn't demand order. Instead, she walked calmly to her desk, set down her satchel, and began to unpack it with deliberate care. Asterisk, the children, expecting shouting or threats, gradually grew quiet, confused by her serene response. One by one, they stopped their antics. To watch this gray-haired woman who seemed completely unruffled by their performance, Asterisk, good morning, Margaret said finally, her voice carrying the warmth of a grandmother's kitchen. I'm Mrs. Reynolds, and I'm so very glad to meet each of you. Asterisk, Tommy stepped forward, his chin raised defiantly. You won't last a week, he announced. We've already gotten rid of 2 teachers this year. We don't need another one trying to tell us what to do. Asterisk. Margaret looked at him with gentle eyes, seeing not defiance but hurt. She had learned long ago that the children who fought hardest were often the ones who needed love the most. Asterisk, you must be Tommy, she said softly. I've heard you're quite a leader. That's a wonderful gift. Asterisk, Tommy blinked, clearly expecting a different response. The other children exchanged glances, their earlier bravado beginning to waver. Asterisk, would you all help me arrange the desks? Margaret asked, as if their rebellion had been nothing more than enthusiastic energy. I have some ideas about how we might make our classroom feel more like home. Asterisk, for the next hour. Instead of diving into lessons or laying down rules, Margaret worked alongside the children. She asked about their interests, their families, their dreams. She really listened to their answers. Asterisk, when Sarah mentioned that her parents were getting divorced, Margaret simply nodded with understanding. When Jake admitted he was struggling with reading, she assured him that everyone learned at their own pace. When Tommy revealed that his grandmother, who had been raising him, was in the hospital, Margaret's eyes filled with compassion. Asterisk, that must be very scary, she said quietly. Would you like to talk about it? Asterisk, and there it was. The moment when Tommy's tough facade cracked just a little. His voice grew smaller. She's all I have. If something happens to her, ... Asterisk, Margaret moved closer, her presence radiating the kind of comfort that only comes from years of loving and understanding children. Fear can make us feel angry sometimes, she said gently, and when we're angry, we might do things to push people away before they can leave us first. Asterisk, the classroom had grown completely still. Even the most defiant students found themselves drawn to this woman who spoke to them like human beings rather than problems to be solved. Asterisk, over the following days, Margaret continued her quiet revolution. Instead of punishment for misbehavior, She offered understanding. When students acted out, she looked for the need behind the behavior. When they tested her limits, she remained calm and consistent, like a lighthouse in a storm. Asterisk, she brought homemade cookies on Fridays. Just because you're all working so hard, she would say. She stayed after school to help Jake with his reading, never making him feel ashamed of his struggles. She called Tommy's grandmother in the hospital, assuring her that Tommy was being looked after with love. Asterisk, the transformation wasn't immediate, but it was profound. Day by day, the children began to lower their defenses. They started to trust this gentlewoman who saw the best in them even when they couldn't see it in themselves. Asterisk, Tommy, who had been the most resistant, became Margaret's most devoted student. He began helping other children with their math, his natural leadership qualities now channeled toward kindness rather than rebellion. Asterisk, Sarah, dealing with her parents' divorce, found in Margaret a safe harbor where she could express her fears without judgment. Her academic performance, which had been declining, began to improve as her emotional needs were met. Asterisk, Jake, no longer ashamed of his reading difficulties, began to flourish under Margaret's patient tutoring. He discovered a love for storytelling, and Margaret encouraged him to share his tales with the younger classes. Asterisk, 3 months into the school year, Principal Davidson made an unannounced visit to Margaret's classroom. She expected to find the usual chaos, perhaps gathering evidence that this latest teacher had also failed to tame the infamous 4th grade class. Asterisk, instead, she found children working together on a science project, their voices animated with genuine excitement about learning. Tommy was helping a struggling classmate with her calculations. Sarah was reading aloud to a small group, her voice confident and clear. Jake was illustrating a story he had written, his face bright with pride. Asterisk, Margaret sat among them, not commanding from the front of the room, but participating as a guide and facilitator. Her presence was like a warm embrace that encompassed the entire classroom. Asterisk, after the students had left for the day, Principal Davidson approached Margaret with wonder in her eyes. Asterisk, how did you do it? She asked. These children, they're completely different. They're not just behaving, they're thriving. Asterisk, Margaret smiled, the same gentle smile she had worn on her first day. I didn't change them, she said simply. I just loved them exactly as they are. Children know when they're truly seen and valued. Once they felt safe, they naturally wanted to be their best selves. Asterisk, as the school year progressed, word of the transformation spread. Other teachers began to visit Margaret's classroom, seeking to understand her methods. But Margaret's approach couldn't be reduced to techniques or strategies. It was simpler. And more profound than that, it was love in action. Asterisk, on the last day of school, the children presented Margaret with a handmade book titled Our Teacher, Our Friend. Each page contained a drawing and a message from a student, expressing gratitude not just for what she had taught them academically, but for how she had made them feel valued and understood. Asterisk, Tommy's page read, Thank you for seeing the good in me when I couldn't see it myself. Asterisk, Sarah had written, You taught me that it's okay to feel scared and sad, and that someone will always care. Asterisk, Jake's contribution said, You helped me find my voice and my stories. I'll never forget your kindness. Asterisk, Margaret's eyes filled with tears as she read each heartfelt message. This was why she had become a teacher all those years ago, not to fill young minds with facts and figures, but to nurture young hearts and help children discover their own worth. Asterisk, years later, long after Margaret had retired, her former students would still speak of her with reverence. They would tell their own children about the teacher who changed their lives, not through discipline or demands, but through unwavering kindness and belief in their potential. Asterisk, Tommy grew up to become a teacher himself, carrying forward Margaret's legacy of compassion. Sarah became a counselor, helping other children navigate difficult times. Jake published the children's books he had begun writing in Margaret's classroom. Asterisk, the lesson Margaret had taught them went far beyond reading, writing, and arithmetic. She had shown them that every person has value, that understanding is more powerful than judgment, and that sometimes the greatest strength is found in gentleness. Asterisk, in a world that often seems harsh and unforgiving, Margaret Reynolds had created a sanctuary of kindness. She had proven that love, patience, and genuine care could transform not just a classroom, but the hearts and futures of the children within it. Asterisk, and perhaps that is the most important lesson of all, that in 60 seconds of genuine kindness, we can plant seeds of hope that will bloom for a lifetime.